Hey, seventh grade. So, where we left off, we found out where Mrs. Trottle had taken Raymond, and all of the creatures were talking to the king and queen, and they threatened that if they weren't able to get Raymond or get the prince back in a day, then they would go and get the prince themselves. And the king and queen don't want their son to be taken that way. So let's see what happens. The plodger liked his job. He didn't mind the smell of sewage. It was a natural smell, nothing fancy about it, but it belonged. He liked the long, dark tunnels and the quiet and the clever way that the water courses joined each other and branched out. He could tell exactly where he was, under which street or square or park, just from the way the pipes ran. It was a good feeling knowing he could walk along 20 feet under Piccadilly Circus and not be bothered by the traffic and the hooting and the silly people trying to cross the road. It wasn't a bad living either. It was amazing that people got lost down. It was amazing what people lost down the loo or the plug hole of a bath, especially on a Saturday night. Not alligators. The stories about alligators in the sewers were mostly rubbish, but earrings or cigarette lighters or spectacles. His father had been in the same line of business, and his grandfather before him. Flushers, they were called, the people who made a living from the drains. Of course, having some fish blood helped. That's what the marrows were, people who married things that lived in the water. Not mermen. Oh, sorry. Not that there had been any tails in the family. Marrows and mermen are not the same. Melisande was quite right to be proud of her feat. Tails were a darn nuisance. No one could work the sewers with a tail. Thinking about Melisande brought a frown to the plodger's whiskery face. Melisande was all churned up. She had got very fond of the Fae, all of the rescuers, and now she worried because they couldn't find that dratted boy. All yesterday they searched, and they were at it again, scuttling up there, but there wasn't any news. Over his woolly hat the plodger wore a helmet with a little light in it, and now bending down he saw a pink necklace bobbing in the muck. Not real, he could see that at once. Plastic, but a pretty thing. It would fetch a few pence when it was cleaned up, and that was good. And that was good enough for him. He wasn't greedy. Scooping it up on his long-handled net, he tramped on along the ledge behind the stream of sludge. He was near the Thames now. He wouldn't go under it, not today. There were good pickings sometimes from the busy street that ran beside the river. He turned right, plodded through a storm relief chamber, and made his way along one of the oldest tunnels close to the Waterloo Bridge. You could tell how old it was, with the brickwork being so neat and careful. No one made bricks like that nowadays. Then suddenly he stopped and sniffed. His snout-like nose was wrinkled. His mouth was pursed up in disgust. Something different had just come down. Something horrid and yucky and wrong. Something that didn't belong among the natural wholesome smell of the drains. Ugh, said the plodger, and shook his head as though he could escape the sickly odor. A rat scuttled past him, and he fancied that it was running away from the gooey smell that he wanted to do himself. Rats were sensible. You could trust them. It wasn't just nasty. It was familiar. He'd smelled it before, that sweet, overpowering, clinging smell. But where? He thought for a moment, standing on the ledge beside the slowly moving sludge. Yes, he remembered now. Not here, in quite a different part of the town. He was excited now. Moving forward, he examined the inlet a few paces ahead. Yes, that was where it was coming from, running down in a slurp of bath water. He tilted his head so as to shine the torch down the pipe, making sure he knew exactly where he was. Then he turned again and hurried away, turning left, right, left again. A lipstick case bobbed up quite near him. Brand new it looked too, but he wouldn't stop. Half an hour later, he was lifting the manhole cover on the path between the Serpentine and the summer house inside the park. No one, at first, could believe the wonderful news. They stood around the Plodger and stared at him with shining eyes. You really mean it? You found the prince? Asked Gerke, holding a leek which had sprung out of the ground before she could stop it. The Plodger nodded. Leastways, I found the mother. But how? Cornelius was completely bewildered. Surely the Trottles weren't hiding in the sewer. The Plodger answered with a single word. Man-eater, he said. Man-eater? The wizard shook out his ear trumpet. Surely he had misheard. That rubbishy scent that Mrs. Trottle uses? It's got a kick like a mule. I used to smell it when I worked the drains under Trottle Towers, and just now I smelt it again. The ring of faces stared at him, breathless with suspense. Oh, where? Oh, please tell us where, begged Gerke. I can tell you for certain, said the Plodger, with quite pride, because I followed the outlet right back. It came from Astor. That's where Mrs. Trottle's taken Raymond. She's holed up here in London, and as a clever place as you can find, getting the purser out of there will be like getting him out of Fort Knox. The Astor was a hotel, but not an ordinary one. It was a super luxury, 5-star, incredibly grand hotel. The front of the hotel faced a wide street with elegant shops and nightclubs, and the back of the hotel looked out over the river Thames with its bridges and passing boats. Gentlemen were only allowed to have tea in the Astor Lounge if they were wearing a tie, and the women who danced in the ballroom wore dresses which cost as much as a bus driver earned in a year. The Astor had its own swimming pool and gym, and in the entrance hall were showcases with one crocodile skin shoe in them or a diamond bracelet, and there was a flower shop and a hairdresser and a beauty salon so that you never had to go outside at all. Best of all was the famous Astor cake. This was not a real cake, not the kind you eat. It was a huge cake made out of plywood, painted pink, and decorated with curly bits that looked like icing. And every night, while the guests were at dinner, it was wheeled into the restaurant, and a beautiful girl jumped out of the cake and danced. Needless to say, ordinary people didn't stay in a hotel like that. It was pop stars and business tycoons and politicians and oil sheiks who came to the Astor, and people of that kind are usually afraid. Pop stars are afraid of fans who will rush up to them and tear their clothes, and politicians are afraid of being shot by the people they have bullied, and oil sheiks and business tycoons like to do their work in secret. So the Astor had the best security service in the world. Guards with armbands and walkie-talkies patrolled the corridors. There were burglar alarms everywhere and bomb-proof safes in the basements where the visitors could keep their jewels. Best of all, there was a special penthouse on the roof built of reinforced concrete, and the rooms in it had extra thick walls and secret numbers and lifts which came up inside of them so they weren't used by the other guests at all. What's more, the penthouse was built around a helicopter pad, so that these incredibly important people could fly in and out of the hotel without being seen by anyone down the street. And it was one of these secret rooms, number 202, which Mrs. Trottle had rented for herself and Raymond. Actually, it wasn't one room. It was a whole apartment with a luxurious sitting room and a bedroom with twin beds so that Mrs. Trottle could watch over her babykin even when he slept. Even so, she had checked into the hotel under a different name. She had called herself Lavinia Tarbuck, and Raymond was Roland Tarbuck, and both of them wore dark glasses so that they stumbled a lot but felt important. Although the Astor bristled with security men, Mrs. Trottle had hired 2 bodyguards especially for Raymond. Bruce Trout was a fat man with a ponytail, but the fatness wasn't wobbly like Raymond's. It was solid like lard. His teeth had rotted years ago because he never cleaned them, and the false ones didn't fit, so they weren't often in his mouth. They were usually behind the teapot, or his teeth were under the sofa. Not that that mattered. If there was any trouble, Bruce could kill someone even without his teeth, and had done so many times. But it was the other bodyguard that was the most feared and the most famous one in London. Doreen Trout was Bruce's sister, but she couldn't have been more different. She was small and mousy, with a bun of gray hair and weak blue eyes behind round spectacles. Doreen wore lumpy tweed skirts and thick stockings, and more than anything, she loved to knit. She knitted all day long. Purple cardigans, pink booties, and heather mixture ankle socks. Clackety click went Doreen's needles from morning to night, and they were sharp. Those needles were incredibly sharp. And here's what we'll solve for today, 7th grade. So keep listening, and we're getting close to the end. Let's see what happens.